Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. That was so nice. It's nice to return to the pulpit for such a joyous Shabbat morning. And let me wish a mazel tov to the Schneiders, and to the Nelsons. I think this was the most candy we ever had thrown. It was so nice that you could bring all that candy. I did contact the Guinness Book of World Records. They said we were just short of the most candy in a Shabbat service, so we'll have to try again. We've had a wonderful summer here at Emunah, filled with really stimulating Divrei Torah, delivered by these sermons, these talks delivered by members of our community. And I want to thank Terry Schwartz-Russell for organizing the entire series. For many of us, the summertime is a good time to take a break, to head outdoors, to enjoy nature, experience life a little bit differently. And my wife and Sharon and I stole away for a night to Woodstock, Vermont. Actually, it was supposed to be 2 nights, but there was a little COVID outbreak at Camp Ramah in New England. And our son Matan was the COVID bunk was already full. So he was sent home and we locked him in the basement, lovingly, of course. And then that required some detours to drop him off, but everything was fine. It's a good reminder that COVID is the gift that keeps on giving. We up in Woodstock watched with fascination the glass blowers at Simon Pierce. And then we took a hike along this trail, the Faulkner Trail up Mount Tom, which is pretty much right in Woodstock. And we kept going up and up this switchback trail until you get to about 1,300, 1,400 feet. And suddenly, just above the trees, this majestic view opens up. And you could see across to other mountains, see the valleys below. And it's just this wonderful moment of grandeur. And there is something about a mountain that has that beauty. And standing atop of it gives you this feeling of power, of perspective, and simply of wonder. Looking at a mountain from afar, they're of course magnificent. I remember the first time I landed in the Denver airport and I looked out at the windows in the airport itself and I looked at the Rockies and my mind kept saying, these are obviously fake. There can't be something so large. And obviously someone just painted these into the windows like some kind of movie set. Mountains play a major role in our tradition. Think about mountains, famous mountains in Judaism. All right, so we got Mount Sinai, Moses atop of Sinai. That's definitely first answer up on the board. Survey says, yeah, what else? Mount Moriah, Abraham brings his son Isaac to be bound on the altar on Mount Moriah. Another one? Mount Gilboa. Okay, we're getting a little more esoteric. Other ones? Mount Carmel. We have Elijah the prophet battling with the prophets of Baal atop of Mount Carmel. And of course, I'm sure we could think of others. One of my favorites, Har Nevo, right in Jordan, just across from the Jordan River in modern day Jordan. Moses ascends that mountain, sees the entire land of Israel, and of course cannot enter it, and there he dies. Now, while this morning's Torah reading contains many laws, as Jacob mentioned in his thoughtful Dvar Torah, it opens with a very straightforward teaching. Behold, or see, today I'm giving before you a blessing, bracha, uklala, and a curse. this is a kind of big theme in our tradition. You get a blessing if you do well. If you don't get a blessing, not so good. And so we find before Moses' death, over and over again, the book of Deuteronomy, Moses is teaching the Israelites how important it is that they have fidelity to the tradition. And while they accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai almost 40 years earlier, they need to keep being remembered. And every generation needs to be remembered that they are still bound by it. Now, over the years, I've read these verses many times and thought about this blessing and the curse and how it fits in with other similar paragraphs like the second paragraph of the Shema. But I didn't really notice everything in the text. And last week, I had the good luck to read the Torah portion. And as you read Torah, as anyone who knows how to learn Torah, as we just saw so beautifully, right? You have to chant the verses over and over again because there are no vowels, there are no trup sounds. And so you need to keep reciting them until you really get it and get it in your head and memorize it. And suddenly, like a mountain that was always there, but you suddenly have it appear in between the trees, I saw something that I had basically totally missed. And that is that the blessings and curses are offered on top of two mountains, Har Gerizim to the north and Har Eval to the south. Somehow I've forgotten about these mountains and how they were to be used. And later on in the book of Deuteronomy, there's a full explication of the scene. The Israelites are instructed to perform a kind of elaborate ritual when they enter the land. And from this, you'll see this map of Israel that I'm drawing here up on the board. Here's the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. They were coming in from modern-day Jordan to the east and crossing the Jordan River and heading west. They were walking, according to our Torah reading, on a road called Mivo HaShemesh, which literally means the sunset road, right? The sun is going down. Or I love Professor Jeff Teague in his commentary calls it Sunset Boulevard. So that's the way I'm going to call it. So they're walking west along Sunset Boulevard until they get to the city of Shechem, which is a city just east of a modern city on the West Bank, Nablus. The people are then supposed to stop just before getting to Shechem, and they stop between these two mountains of Har Gerizim to the north and Har Eval to the south. Each one is about 3,000 feet high, not super high, especially if you go to the White Mountains. But for Israel, these were decent-sized mountains. And at their narrowest point, they're only about a third of a mile apart. So they're pretty close. Now, someone stood on top of Har Gerizim, Mount Gerizim to the north, and recited all the blessings. Here's the good stuff. And then someone else clearly picked the short straw and this had to pronounce all the curses from the southern mountain. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But of course, these curses, we don't really call them curses anymore, we call them punishments, or I understand today they're simply consequences. But anyway, these were what you got if you broke the covenant. And that's the agreement between God and the Israelites, and the ceremony took place between these two mountains. So some questions. Why was this the place chosen for this ritual? And of course, the geography on my map is helpful. Halfway between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, cutting across, you reach the center, north-south and east-west of the country. This is, of course, also the place where many significant moments occurred. Abraham, when he comes into the land, the first place that he builds an altar is here in Shechem. The first place that his grandson Jacob buys land in Israel, Shechem. And the place where they bring Joseph's bones back when they come back to the land after being in Egypt for so long, he's buried in You guys are following along nice. There's also some natural features to this site. And you can see them in pictures on the internet. They're steep mountains, and kind of carved into the sides are these natural amphitheaters. So the people who would gather there would have a nice seat for this ritual and could sit down as this covenant was read. Not clear exactly how much of the book of Deuteronomy, but maybe it was enough that you needed to sit down. And then afterwards, there might have been a nice kiddush. I don't know. But that was why it was an important place. They could sit and hear the echoing words of the covenant. And why mountains? Well, mountains we already mentioned, and they hearken back to Sinai. This is now like a second Sinai. Instead of being in the wilderness between Egypt and Israel, now the Israelites are in the promised land, in their homeland. And so what is the ceremony all about? It's a second marriage. The first one, the Torah is saying it was at Mount Sinai. The chuppah there, the wedding canopy, could have been the mountain itself. And we have the two tablets of the law. Maybe they're like the two witnesses you need. The ketubah or contract was the Torah itself, the obligations that are bound on each party. And here, between Mount Gerizim and Mount Eval, it's a little bit different. The covenant is carved on stels, stone on which the core of the covenant, these laws are written upon. And here, who are the witnesses? The two mountains themselves, which of course is very fitting. You need two witnesses, but who else can witness such an agreement between God and the Jewish people? It's nature itself. And there's walking. Just as the partners in a Jewish wedding walk around each other, both ceremonies have movement. This ancient walking involved passing between something which signifies that both parties acquiesced to the agreement. But now they're walking in the land of Israel. And while Moses previously might have been kind of an intermediary between God and Israel, now they are charged to be more directly responsible for facilitating this relationship. In both cases, the people, however, are at the bottom of this natural wonder, looking up, feeling a sense of awe in God's presence and becoming aware of the sanctity of the moment. So how does this text now guide us today? I always like to try to find how it can relate to our lives. And I think it relates that we too need to renew our commitments. Our vows need to be reaffirmed again and again, restated, made explicit, celebrated over and over again. We just did that this morning with the prayers for our community, country, Israel, and peace, explicitly stating our values. It's also a reminder that it takes work and dedication to remain committed to our agreements, like a marriage, a family, a friendship, a community, a set of laws, a democracy, or the planet itself. All of these relationships are built on explicit or implicit contracts. But we need to remind ourselves over and over again that we are in fact bound by them. Reciting the Pledge of Allegiance or singing the national anthem will hopefully remind us of our duty to this country and its increasingly more and more fragile democracy. Reciting the prayer for Israel, as we just did, reminds us that the only democracy in the Middle East continues to need our support amidst the complexities that it finds itself. The same holds true for our closest relationships. Celebrating an anniversary can be a time to recommit to one another. For us here at Temple Emunah, I think that we need to explore how to recommit ourselves to our community by coming regularly, by participating, by taking on leadership roles. In Judaism, this reaffirmation was celebrated on Shavuot, when we reenacted and recalled the revelation at Sinai. These days, I think more and more Jews actually don't come on Shavuot, in case you haven't noticed this, but they come on the high holidays. So we have to see that moment when we stand up for our faith, our values, and our priorities. During these more, and I'm really not sure what to call them, more-ish, post-ish COVID days, as we head towards the start of the new year, let us remind ourselves of our obligations to God, to the tradition, and to one another. While we might not have two great mountains to stand between and have an elaborate ceremony to witness all of this, luckily Temple Emunah is built on a hill, and that will have to do just fine. Shabbat Shalom.